When Remy returned to Los Angeles, the city had changed, but its pulse still carried the same rhythm he once manipulated for his own gain. The streets smelled of opportunity wrapped in deceit, the kind of fragrance he used to bottle and sell as success. He walked through the marble corridors of Forrester's fashion empire like a ghost who remembered every whisper of the walls. Years ago, he had left with arrogance, convinced that the world would follow his design. Now he came back cloaked in the calm of someone who had learned that the past never truly dies, it only hides behind better lighting. What startled him most was not how much had evolved, but who had. Electra, the woman he once bent like a melody, no longer moved to his tune. Her laughter, once a sound he owned, had become an anthem of her own making, sharpened and lifted by a new alliance with Deke, the quietly ambitious designer whose sincerity was both her strength and her vulnerability. Remy watched them from the shadows of opening nights and press gatherings. The fashion world adored redemption stories, and Electra had mastered hers. Her fall from grace, the whispered breakdown, the tabloid scandal involving funding misuse, had been buried under new headlines about her bold, inclusive designs and the partnership that was transforming Forrester's younger line. Deke stood beside her at every event, grounding her, whispering encouragement where once Remy had whispered control. For him, love had been a transaction. For Deke, it was rescue. But Remy never believed in rescue. He believed in leverage. Somewhere in the abyss between obsession and strategy, he began building his plan. He didn't need to destroy Electra publicly, at least not yet. Information was power, and he had plenty. Years ago, when the Luna scandal consumed the tabloids and fractured the Spencer and Logan alliances, Remy had been among the first to know that the story told on camera wasn't the whole truth. He had followed money transfers, silence assistance, and private therapy notes, threads that hinted Luna wasn't simply a victim or aggressor, but a piece in a bigger, crueler system. Somewhere in those threads was a name that connected her to the Forresters, and if that name surfaced, the empire could crumble from within. Remy had kept the files out of habit. Now they became his currency. Electra's recovery annoyed him because it represented a world moving on without him. He remembered her voice trembling when she signed away the rights to her first collection, her dependence on his approval, her belief that he saw her potential. He had built her, he told himself, sculpted her courage from clay. Yet now she glowed under spotlights that he hadn't installed. The irony gnawed at his chest like rust. He told himself he wasn't jealous, just curious about what kind of woman could rebuild herself so easily. But curiosity became hunger, and hunger needed fuel. He sent her a single message, polite, nostalgic, dangerous in its simplicity. Congratulations on finding your light. But remember who held the match. It was the first crack in her calm. She deleted it, of course, but deletion doesn't erase memory. For nights she lay awake, the old panic returning, the dread of what he might still hold over her. She told Deke she was fine, but Deke noticed the tremor in her hand when she signed documents, the sudden silences when his phone rang. The ghosts of the industry were back, wearing familiar cologne. Remy began appearing where he wasn't invited, press previews, charity auctions, whisper parties in Beverly Hills. He never approached her directly. He let presence do the work of persuasion. Electra's confidence began to fray, thread by thread. Then he made his move, a private meeting, staged under the guise of reconciliation. The cafe was bright, neutral, public enough to seem safe. He spoke softly, his tone soaked in false warmth. He didn't threaten her outright. He only reminded her of how much he knew. About her funding arrangements from years before, about the unreported investor whose disappearance had raised quiet alarms, about Luna's file, how one misstep could link Electra's name to that entire toxic narrative. Electra left the meeting shaking, realizing that Remy's power was no longer physical, but psychological. He had once controlled her through emotion. Now he controlled her through fear of exposure. He offered a bargain that was both absurd and believable. Return to him, even just professionally, and the secrets stay buried. refuse, and he would release everything: emails, financial proofs, even the therapy logs she once begged him to destroy. That night, she told no one. Deke slept peacefully beside her while she sat at the window, watching the lights of the city, realizing how fragile her new life was. Remy had found the one flaw in her armor: guilt. For all her public redemption, she still carried the shame of having once loved her abuser. And Remy understood guilt better than anyone. It was the leash he had used on her for years. When rumors began to swirl in the press about a mysterious insider connected to Luna's old case, Elektra knew it was him testing the waters. He wanted her attention, and he had it. She met with Deacon and Katie, both veterans of media wars and legal storms. Katie, hardened by years of defending Bill's empire, recognized the pattern immediately. Remy's playbook was clear: intimidation through implication, destruction through suggestion. Deacon wanted to strike back publicly, but Deke urged restraint, fearing it would validate the rumors. Meanwhile, Bill saw an opportunity, not to help, but to control the narrative. If the scandal touched Forrester, he could manipulate the stock ripple for profit. In that, Remy found an unexpected ally, though neither admitted it aloud. The more Elektra tried to ignore Remy, the deeper he embedded himself in the fabric of her life. Anonymous messages appeared in her email drafts. A gift box arrived at Forrester headquarters containing her old sketchbook, one she thought he had burned. At the bottom of the box was a note: "Art never dies, only its maker forgets." She knew it was his handwriting. The psychological warfare was elegant: no direct evidence, no threats traceable by law, just the slow erosion of peace. Behind the glamour of fashion shows and press coverage, a different stage unfolded: a battle of narratives. Remy began leaking selective pieces of information to online tabloids, hinting that Luna's breakdown had been triggered not solely by her obsession with Will but by manipulation from an unnamed Forrester-affiliated designer. The speculation frenzy exploded overnight. Deke and Elektra found themselves dragged into articles connecting them to Luna's treatment program. Elektra's social media filled with accusations that she had enabled abuse. Remy never needed to appear. The crowd did his work for him. But the same technology that empowered him also began to betray him. Deacon, with help from his old underworld connections, traced the leak to a server used by one of Remy's shell companies. It wasn't enough for a court, but it gave them direction. Katie proposed a counterstrike: turn Remy's manipulation into a public case about digital coercion, financial abuse, and emotional control within the creative industry. Bill, surprisingly, agreed to fund the legal push, though his motives remained opaque. Perhaps he saw redemption in helping women he had once underestimated. Perhaps he saw profit. In Los Angeles, those two things were often the same. As the lawsuit preparations began, Remy escalated. He leaked the final piece of a secret: the document connecting Luna's therapy payments to an unmarked account once tied to Forrester Creations. The implication was devastating. It suggested corporate cover-up. The board panicked, PR teams scrambled, and Elektra was summoned to emergency meetings. The nightmare she feared was now public reality. Her brand partnerships paused, investors wavered, and Deke faced pressure to distance himself. Through it all, she kept silent, refusing to let Remy dictate her next move. That silence was her rebellion. For years he had fed on her reactions. Now she starved him of them. She went dark on social media, stopped attending events, and focused on her designs. The absence of noise unnerved him. He began sending more messages, growing desperate. Power, he realized, loses meaning when the victim refuses to acknowledge it. Yet his ego wouldn't let him stop. He broke into her studio one night, searching for proof she still cared: an old photograph, a note, anything. Instead, he found sketches of her new line titled Reclamation. Each design was a reinterpretation of the cage: fabrics woven like bars, patterns symbolizing confinement, silhouettes shaped like freedom breaking through constraint. The collection told her story better than any press statement could. When Fashion Week arrived, Elektra unveiled Reclamation without Deke by her side. He had been hospitalized after an accident on a construction site many suspected wasn't accidental. Remy watched from the audience, invisible among journalists and investors. The crowd erupted, unaware of the personal war behind the runway. The final piece, a shimmering gown embroidered with words in microscopic stitching, carried a message only Remy understood. You can't own what you broke. It was her declaration of independence, and it enraged him. After the show, he cornered her backstage, but security intervened before words could turn to violence. Cameras captured the scuffle, and within hours, the footage flooded the internet. The narrative flipped overnight. The public that once doubted Elektra now saw her terror, saw the man who wouldn't let go. For the first time, Remy lost control of the story. The restraining order came swiftly, the sponsors returned, and Deke recovered enough to stand beside her at the press conference where she announced a foundation for survivors of creative industry coercion. Yet victory came with scars. Elektra's voice trembled during interviews not from fear but from the exhaustion of survival. Deke's optimism dimmed under the weight of their shared trauma. Bill leveraged the story to launch a new media division focused on ethical branding, while Katie quietly ensured the lawsuit against Remy continued. Deacon, ever the opportunist, wrote a tell-all article turning the entire saga into a cautionary tale about redemption and control. Remy, facing criminal charges for harassment and data theft, disappeared before his court date. Rumors placed him in Europe, others said South America. But for Elektra, the question wasn't where he was, it was whether she could ever truly be free of him. Freedom, she realized, wasn't absence, it was endurance. Every time she walked into Forrester headquarters and saw her name on a door he once told her she'd never deserve, she reclaimed another piece of herself. The saga reverberated far beyond fashion. Talk shows debated the blurred lines between mentorship and manipulation, power and love, redemption and rebranding. Luna's name resurfaced, this time framed within a broader narrative about systemic abuse and silence. Will Spencer, struggling with his own guilt, made a public apology for his role in perpetuating myths about victims who invite obsession. The Forresters issued statements on corporate ethics. Even Brooke and Ridge, icons of scandal themselves, acknowledged the hypocrisy of judging others' chaos. But beneath the media noise, the personal truths lingered. Elektra still kept one of Remy's letters locked in a drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what survival costs. Deke learned that loving a survivor meant accepting shadows you could never fully dispel. And Remy, wherever he was, surely watched, knowing that in some twisted way, he had immortalized himself within her story. For a man who thrived on control, becoming the villain in someone else's redemption arc was the ultimate punishment. The narrative that began as manipulation ended as revelation, a mirror held to a world addicted to power dynamics disguised as passion. Remy had returned to reclaim what he thought was his, but in the process, he revealed the fragility of every empire built on control. Elektra's victory was not in winning the public's sympathy, but in rewriting her own mythology. She was no longer the muse, the victim, or the scandal. She was the author. And somewhere, deep in the digital archives of the fashion world, the files Remy once weaponized remained, silent, encrypted, waiting. Because in the bold and the beautiful, secrets never vanish. They only evolve, shifting from hands that abuse to those that heal, from stories that destroy to those that expose. The city would move on to its next scandal, its next obsession. But the echo of this one would stay, a reminder that the most dangerous kind of beauty is the kind born from surviving what was meant to break you. Under the roaring December skies of Los Angeles, the bold and the beautiful enters a new, storm-ridden chapter, one that ties together guilt, ambition, and redemption across generations. The week beginning December 1st, 2025, unfolds as a psychological labyrinth where every confession rips through another life. Dylan's tear-streaked truth sets off an emotional earthquake that shatters the serenity of the Cliff House, while Bill Spencer, restless and manipulative, resurrects his empire's seductive power to reclaim the woman he believes is his anchor. Yet, amid the clashing egos and quiet reckonings, the essence of every character trembles between forgiveness and self-destruction, making this chapter one of the darkest and most intimate explorations of human fragility in recent B&B memory. Dylan stands in the doorway of the Cliff House, framed against the dusk that bleeds into the Pacific horizon, her trembling silhouette carrying the weight of a ghost. She has walked miles through her guilt, her footsteps echoing with the memory of Luna's screams and Finn's silent stare. The salt wind cuts into her cheeks, as if punishing her for every lie she has swallowed. Inside, the house feels too pure, too full of the life she shattered. The moment she begins to speak, her voice breaks, not from fear of rejection but from the unbearable realization that once she confesses, she can never return to being the naive girl who believed in redemption. Her admission, that she never meant to kill, that it was an accident born of panic, hangs in the air like smoke. Yet the moment she utters Luna's name, she feels her soul bleed out through her words. Finn's silence is a blade sharper than accusation, while Steffi's face, pale and rigid, hides the war raging behind her eyes. For Steffi, the truth brings a twisted relief. Luna's ghost can finally rest, but it also brings the knowledge that her peace has come at the cost of another's torment. Finn, once the moral compass of his fractured family, becomes the embodiment of contradiction. As a doctor, he is trained to save lives. As a father, he is condemned to grieve one. In the stillness after Dylan's confession, his mind flashes through the sterile corridors of the hospital, through the soft, fading heartbeat that once belonged to his daughter. He wants to forgive, to be the man Steffi believes him to be, but forgiveness feels like betrayal. Every word Dylan utters draws him deeper into a labyrinth where compassion and rage intertwine. To Steffi, Finn's hesitation is dangerous, proof that grief can cloud reason. But to Finn, Steffi's need for closure feels almost cruel, an attempt to erase pain before it has finished teaching them what loss truly means. Their love, once unshakable, begins to erode beneath the slow tide of resentment and unspoken blame. Meanwhile, Dylan's guilt metastasizes. She cannot sleep. Every sound of the sea becomes Luna's voice calling from the depths. Electra, the only person who knows the full truth, becomes her fragile tether to sanity. Yet even that bond trembles as rumors swirl through Forrester creations. Some say Dylan confessed to avoid prison. Others whisper she's fabricating the story to protect someone more powerful. The lines between truth and survival blur, and Dylan begins to wonder if atonement is ever truly possible in a world that thrives on spectacle. She feels both condemned and absolved, loved and despised, a tragic reflection of every soul who has ever tried to cleanse themselves in the unforgiving light of public judgment. At Spencer Publications, the air vibrates with another kind of tension. Bill Spencer, the self-made titan, leans back in his office chair, gazing over the skyline like a man plotting the next empire. He has watched the Forrester clan unravel from afar and now sees an opening, not in business, but in love. Katie Logan has been drifting, her loyalty divided between gratitude to Ridge's family and resentment for the way they protect her as if she were fragile glass. Bill senses the fracture and moves in with calculated tenderness. He invites her back to Spencer Publications under the pretense of empowerment, promising her a place where she can reclaim her voice and legacy. Yet beneath his suave confidence lies a hunger more dangerous than affection, the need to rewrite his past mistakes through her. To Bill, Katie has always represented the part of him that might have been saved, and now, surrounded by ambition and nostalgia, he decides to possess that salvation at any cost. Katie, however, is not the same woman he once controlled with charm and diamonds. Her heart, though soft, has been hardened by years of being the sensible Logan, the sister who fixes what others break. When Ridge and Eric make decisions for her, out of supposed love, something inside her fractures. Bill's invitation tempts her not because of romance, but because of independence. Yet every step toward him feels like walking into the same fire she once escaped. Her gratitude to her sisters is genuine, but it is laced with exhaustion. Brooke and Donna's embraces no longer feel like comfort, but like cages woven from expectation. She yearns to breathe her own air, even if it smells like Bill's empire of deceit. Then comes the complication neither of them anticipates. Will Spencer, once the innocent symbol of their love, he now observes his parents with the sharp eyes of youth. When he overhears Bill's proposition and Katie's hesitant tone, something ignites in him, a rebellion against manipulation. Will has grown up surrounded by power games. He knows how words can twist truth. Electra, standing beside him on the staircase, becomes an unwilling witness to the generational cycle repeating itself. Their presence turns a private conversation into a ticking time bomb. For Will, it is a lesson in how love and ambition can destroy each other. For Electra, it is a glimpse into the danger of aligning with any Spencer too closely. At Forrester Creations, the storm takes a different shape. Eric Forrester, the patriarch whose hands built the fashion house from dust and desire, finds himself sidelined by his own son. Ridge's decision to hire an external PR firm feels to Eric like an act of betrayal wrapped in corporate efficiency. To the world, it's business. To Eric, it's personal, a sign that his voice no longer defines the brand. The once mighty designer feels the chill of irrelevance creeping through his veins. As Ridge tries to justify the move with rational calm, Eric's fury erupts. He sees in his son not the partner he once nurtured, but a rival blinded by the illusion of progress. Their confrontation reverberates through the halls of Forrester Creations, shaking even the youngest interns who feel the air thicken with the ghosts of old wars between fathers and sons. The more Ridge tries to pacify Eric, the deeper the wound grows. Eric, who once preached unity, now embodies pride and nostalgia. His anger is not merely about the PR firm, it is about the dying echo of legacy. He fears that once his voice fades, so will the soul of Forrester Creations. But what he fails to see is that Ridge, too, carries the burden of expectation. Every decision Ridge makes is haunted by the need to prove he is not merely Eric's successor, but his equal. Their argument becomes a mirror of generational pain, one man afraid of becoming forgotten, another terrified of never being enough. The parallel between Eric and Ridge mirrors the emotional battlefield between Bill and Katie, between Finn and Dylan. Each pair fights the same invisible enemy: time. The old guard clings to control, while the younger ones crave meaning beyond inherited power. The week of December 1st becomes a symbolic crossroads for all of them, a collision between past sins and future choices. Dylan's confession fractures the Forrester-Finnegan household. Bill's manipulation tempts Katie back into old patterns. Eric's wrath exposes the fear beneath authority. In each storyline, love and pride are indistinguishable, blurring the line between redemption and self-destruction. By midweek, the emotional tempo rises to a fever pitch. Steffi, though relieved that Luna's death was unintentional, begins to resent Dylan's ability to elicit sympathy. She sees Finn's empathy as a threat to their marriage and channels her unease into control, organizing, managing, deciding what happens next. But control, as always in this world, is an illusion. Dylan, seeking forgiveness, approaches Finn privately, and that single act, however innocent, plants the seed of jealousy that could unravel Steffi's stability. Meanwhile, Katie visits Spencer Publications, where Bill greets her not with flowers but with spreadsheets, a calculated gesture meant to show respect, yet dripping with symbolism. He reminds her that power and love can coexist, but Katie knows too well that in his world, love always kneels before power. As the week closes, each thread tightens. Dylan, ostracized yet unbroken, stands by the ocean at night, whispering apologies to the waves. She knows forgiveness may never come, but for the first time, she feels the wind without fear. It is the sensation of surviving one's own truth. Finn, watching her from afar, understands that some ghosts can only be buried by compassion, not punishment. Katie, staring at her reflection in Bill's glass office, realizes she must choose between being the woman he desires or the woman she finally wants to become. And Eric, sitting alone in his studio, sketches one last design under dim light, a piece that captures not youth or fashion, but legacy itself. In the end, the bold and the beautiful forges a rare harmony between spectacle and sincerity. Every confession, every argument, becomes part of a grander meditation on what it means to outlive one's own story. Dylan's tears are not just about guilt, they are about rebirth. Finn's silence is not weakness, but reverence for loss. Katie's dilemma is not romantic indecision, but the awakening of autonomy. Bill's charm conceals the loneliness of a man who cannot control the world without destroying what he loves. Eric's fury masks the terror of mortality. Through them all, the show paints a haunting portrait of power's fragility and love's resilience. Thus, the week of December 1st, 2025 stands as a turning point, not because of a shocking death or scandal, but because each character stands naked before the truth of who they are. The ocean still roars beneath the Cliff House, the lights of Spencer Publications still gleam against the city night, and Forrester Creations still hums with creation and conflict. But beneath those familiar facades, something has shifted. Secrets have been spoken, and once truth finds its voice, even the most beautiful illusions begin to crack.